Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the AI Files, your ultimate destination for staying updated on all things artificial intelligence. We dive into the latest developments in the AI world, sharing insight from the corporate landscape. We also bring in expert guests to provide the unique perspectives. You can find us in Apple Podcasts as well as YouTube channels. If you're serious about keeping up with the fast paced world of AI and I want to integrate its advancements into your career and company, then this is the podcast for you. I am Shadab Hussain, co host of the AI Files. I'm the director of data and AI at Microsoft with over 22 years of experience in the analytics and AI field.
And I'm Jamie Basilico, co-host of the AI Files. As a data and AI technical specialist and architect, I bring over 35 years of expertise in data-related and AI domains, having worked with many Fortune 500 companies throughout my career. Please note, this is not an official Microsoft channel. The views and opinions expressed by the co-host are their own and do not represent views of Microsoft. Let's dive in.
As per new research from McKinsey Global Institute, AI has the potential to deliver additional global economic activity of around 13 trillion with a T by 2030, or about 16% higher cumulative GDP compared with today. This amounts to about 1.2% additional GDP growth per year. However, it depends on how well the corporates, consumers, and countries adopt AI. Today, we are focusing on the future of AI in the corporate world, industry opportunities, corporate strategies, employee skill development, and the ethical consideration surrounding AI implementation. Our discussion will shed light on where the competition is heading, the role of partnership, and how businesses can measure the success of their AI initiatives.
To help us explore these critical topics, we have an exceptional guest with us today. We're thrilled to welcome Matt Fish. Matt is a Microsoft leader for data and AI business in Northeast within Microsoft. His experience across platforms, consulting, and strategy for data and AI provides us with a remarkable set of insights in what is currently transpiring in the industry. This episode's promises to be packed with invaluable insights as we've structured it to cover a wide range of perspectives from corporate to industry and ethical considerations. Whether you're looking to understand the future of AI in business, discover success stories of AI implementation, or learn how to advance your career in this evolving field, this episode has something for you. Let's dive in and bring Matt on stage.
Hi, Matt. Good morning.
Good morning, Shadab. Good morning, Jamie. Happy Friday.
Hey.
Welcome to be here.
Good morning, Matt. Good to see you again. And looking forward to today's episode and getting into it with you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
again
you so
for
much.
having me. Really excited.
Thank you so much for joining us with your kind of experience and background. People will benefit a lot learning about it. But talking about that, could you please introduce yourself for the benefit of the audience?
Absolutely. So, Matt Fish, I am the general manager of our data and AI stew business here at Microsoft for the Northeast region, covering and working with accounts across a number of different industries, including professional services, media and entertainment, utilities, and others. Previously, I've been in this role close to 4 years. Previously, I was at KPMG working with a lot of very similar technologies around automation, AI, cloud, and before that was working in the AI business and data business for the last 10 plus years. It's an incredibly exciting time. With being in this space for as long as I have been, it's all the announcements and everything and all the innovation that's taken place over the last 2 years, or really 2+ years now, has really opened amazing doors and amazing discussions and conversations and areas for companies to really accelerate and go fast, which I know we'll get into more. But it's been really exciting for me, who have lived, the times before that, to really, see the change and evolution that's happened across AI, across data, and across all these other technologies that complement, this space.
Thank you. So, Matt, looking at your title, looks like you're a big sports fan. Who are you rooting for?
I'm a big sports fan. Tennis, UFC, MMA, NBA. But with the NBA, I'm more of a general fan, so I'm rooting for a long series. I'll be sad when the season comes to an end, but I think I'm rooting for Dallas. So we'll see. I know I've got a lot of friends who are rooting for the Celtics, but I think for this one, I'm rooting for the Mavs. But honestly, I just want to see a good long series between the Mavs and the Celtics.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to not only a good series there, but also, like you said, the UFC fights. But we could talk for hours, I guess, on sports.
For sure.
But certainly we want to get into things and pick your brain and get a viewpoint from you on things that are going on within AI. And maybe I'll kick it off with a first one here. This one, we could almost spend the whole time on this interview just on this first question. But, from the things that you've seen and your experiences, where do you think the future holds for artificial intelligence in the corporate world over the next 5 to 10 years? And maybe 5 to 10 years is so long. I mean, where do you see it over the next 1 to 3 years, and then maybe even further out from there?
Yeah, so great question. It's interesting because you're right. I mean, with the speed and acceleration that everything's happening, 5 to 10 years sounds really long. 5 to 10 months sounds really long with all the announcements that are happening. I think a couple things that come to mind. First, I think adoption. I think over the last 10 years, we've seen so many barriers for companies to really be able to accelerate with AI, whether it was security, just trust in the data around bias and ethics and ethical AI. The cost to implement, the cost to be able to actually run these services. I think that's all changed, and we'll get into more of those details, I'm sure, throughout the session. But I think adoption is the big thing for me. I think technology, a lot of this is now built. You'll see there'll be continued updates and upgrades and things that will be changed, but a lot of the core functionality is now available. And I think adoption is going to be the big, one of the big things. I think the other big thing to me is the whole idea of embedding, right? And I think when you look at the strategy of Microsoft's strategy of co-pilots, I think the tighter you're going to just see more and more tight integration in around embedding this AI technology into solutions, where I think it's going to get to the point where it's going to be ubiquitous. You may not even know you're actually using AI to help with large transformative use cases to day-to-day work. I also think one of the big changes is that some of these really larger moonshots are going to take place. And I think some of the things that companies have been trying to get done for so long and really have put on the back burner because because of all the things I just mentioned, cost, trust, everything else, skills, having the right skills to be able to do this work, I think is all going to come to the forefront. And I think you're going to see larger, much bigger, larger use cases really start to take place, very soon, if not already. We're seeing many companies that are seeing positive ROI, use cases that are in production now. No longer, these proof points, pilots, quote unquote science projects, things that are really in production. I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that at scale. And I think you'll see adoption from the workforce using, AI embedded in a co-pilot strategy.
So kind of curious, you mentioned adoption a couple of times there and quote unquote, that might be what the future holds is broader adoption. If I kind of flip that around, do you think the adoption's been slow to this point? And if so, what's been holding corporations back if adoption in the future is going to be a main thrust?
So I think it depends on the industry, it depends on the company, but I think adoption has been a little bit all over the board from what I've seen in my perspective. I think in a lot of cases, adoption has been there and companies are adopting this. I think in some cases, some companies are a little bit slower to adopt it. I think in some cases, companies are trying to have specific adoption, whether it's one use case versus having it enterprise-wide. I think that that is going to be one thing that will really change. Is I think you're going to see companies continuing to lean in to a quote unquote center of excellence where there is a place for so many ideas to come. Adoption is going to continue. I think we're seeing different industries accelerate at a different pace, but I think overall companies are all getting on board with this idea of adoption. Some, again, are faster movers than others, but it also depends on the use case. Some use cases take longer to adopt, and some use cases need more people to adopt it, right? When you think of work, and leveraging it within work, you're looking at a larger scale. When you're looking at adopting it to help with something within back office, let's say within finance, there could be less people involved to adopt it. So I think it's all depending on scale. I do see more and more of an idea of these COEs. I think governance has been around a long time, especially when we think about data. Governance has been around a long time, and it's not just about the tools. It's about the process around governance, around the people, around the trust. We're seeing that shifting now to AI. Where these COEs are really taking a centralized view and leveraging innovation to bring in all these different use cases to really start vetting which ones they can leverage and adopt and go faster, and weeding out the ones that maybe should be a tier 2, tier 3, and something that they should wait to start looking at or start adopting. So I think we'll see more and more companies looking at how they can have a centralized viewpoint of these COEs. And I think it's an interesting thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout the session too, on skilling, right? And, how do these COEs go fast, and leveraging the right skills, to be able to transform and get these use cases stood up in production.
Well said, Matt. I think the adoption is the most important hurdle to the scaling of the AI. And I think one of the things that I also see in the corporates is that is about who's sponsoring, right? So I think that the sponsor is important, and a lot of time there is the power struggle in the corporates about the sponsorship, about the ownership, etc. And I think if we get that right, the adoption becomes easier. So very well said. I have another question related to the overall competition in the AI world, which also reflects sometimes the adoption is also about, okay, where do we pivot, right? What do you think about the whole AI competition? Where is it heading? Where do you see this? Is it sometimes it just feels like this space is enormous, right? It's too rapid to absorb, too and sometimes it feels, is it too saturated already? There are like a couple of thousand models out there with their variants. What is your perspective on the competition in this space?
It's a great question. I think it's there's a lot to it. I think just kind of breaking it down a little bit. So I think to your point, there's going to be and is a number of different models, right, that you can leverage, both from the companies are going to be bringing out as well as open source, right? When you look at large models, small models, open source models, there's going to be a number of different models. So I think you put that in one bucket. I think there's another bucket of kind of what we were talking about earlier around this embed strategy, where you're going to have AI embedded across a number of technology vendors and those applications and SaaS solutions that they're pushing out across so many different areas. So if you think of, let's just take an area like the call center, there are a lot of very specific vendors and players in the call center space that will have AI applications built into traditional call center solutions that they've already had built and put out in the marketplace. And then I think lastly, you'll have you'll have folks that are vendors that are having end-to-end platforms that really, and there'll be very few. And I think this is where Microsoft really stands out, is our ability from an end-to-end standpoint. When you really look at a full solution, a full stack from the co-pilots, right, where we've got all of our solutions and generative AI built in and tightly embedded across those, where we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting and build for our customers. The second piece is, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I got a question maybe to even expand upon that. You mentioned an end to end, and that enables a customer to actually build these things and thinking about it from, a standpoint of systems. How do you think, at least from a perspective from Microsoft, that ecosystem and maybe the partnerships that Microsoft has, what impact does that have for a customer on their implementation of AI projects? Is that something that you would seem beneficial? Is that something that muddies the water? And how does that translate into, an organization being able to successfully implement their AI goals and projects?
For sure. I mean, I think so. I think to your point, I think having the ability to have one vendor that has a marketplace, right, similar to what we have here at Microsoft, and the ability to leverage all of the services that are tightly integrated. It's one thing to have these different Lego blocks that you're piecing together and pulling together. There's a lot of advantage to that, but to be able to have this tightly integrated, industrialized solutions that they can really leverage to go quicker, go faster, I think is key. And we're seeing that. And I think we're seeing that across some of the companies that we're working with that are already in production, that have been able to leverage those to scale, and really trust those services and trust the security that's built around it, and everything, the foundations that have been built around those different services. It's interesting to bring that up, Jamie, because one thing that we saw, at least early on, was a lot of these solutions, when companies were looking at Gen AI, were not single-threaded with just large language models. They were leveraging other pieces across, whether it was stuff from low code, whether it was stuff from search, different pieces to be integrated into the solution. And those connectors, are huge for companies to be able to really get to some of these use cases, and to accelerate.
What are the biggest areas of the opportunities, Matt, that you see where AI can actually really help transform?
So I think it's a great question. So I think a couple things. One is, I think, across just productivity, right? When we talk about just day-to-day work and being able to be more productive at work, at more scale, at more speed. So I think that's one, right? Just the overall productivity. AI is never going to take over a role, right? It's interesting. So, about 10 years ago, there was a big article that came out and a big story around how AI was going to take over all these jobs. And then fast forward 10 years from now, and the same questions are still coming up. It has never happened, right? It's always a co-pilot. That's why I love it's really the branding of a co-pilot. It's really a companion, a co-pilot. There's always going to be that human in the loop. So I think, the productivity piece, I think, is a huge one. Just making life easier, from a work standpoint. I think the second one is, again, kind of what we talked about, is these moonshot use cases. Things that companies are trying to get to, they've just never been able to accomplish, whether it's really complex things within back office, let's say something like tax, right, where there's so much cost, so much complexity, and being able to leverage AI to transform something like that, or to make life easier and more complete around something like tax and audit, or stuff like we talked about within call center, just making that customer experience easier. Customer experience is pretty interesting because AI has been around that area for quite some time, in some of those use cases. But Gen AI, over the last 2 years have really opened up, companies wanting to relook at things and how they can go faster at leveraging it.
I guess maybe on that thought, can you point to any one or two notable success stories for companies that, have used AI, Gen AI or any other form of AI to transform that customer experience notion?
Yeah.
And by the way, don't give away who the customers are, but be very curious on what you think has been, a really good success story.
Yeah, I'll give two examples, and actually this just came up the last couple of weeks. So one is, so when we think of large support centers, right, like the work that we're doing within our own, transforming our own support center here at Microsoft, I was talking to a customer just recently who was talking about how they're leveraging AI for, they get hundreds of thousands of calls, but they've never really been able to they do all the transcription on post call, but really be able to have this idea of post call listening. So all the calls are complete. How do you then transcript all those calls and then start doing the analytics on top of it? Transcription, again, and post call listening has been around a long time. Being able to really understand those KPIs, leveraging Gen AI to be able to get that information, especially across hundreds of thousands of calls, is huge. The second one, which is really interesting, is this idea of live call listening. Agent Assist has been around as well a long time, well before Gen AI was really brought to the market over the last couple of years. But what has been transformed with this live call listening or Agent Assist is a real time where an agent can understand best practices. So how has the call comes in, understanding the topic of the call, and then the agent being able to real time understand best practices on how somebody else has triaged a call very similar, very recently, and leverage those learnings and insights real time to be able to help reduce the average handle time of a call, increase customer sat of the call. So those are two, but there's a number of them around customer support, whether it's from the upfront on the IVR, and how some of the Gen AI work is being put into the upfront call of the IVR, to some of the things around the agent, and again some of the stuff around the post call listening.
Got it. Hey, some folks may not be familiar with IVR. Do you want to just what's that short for?
So great question, Jamie. So IVR is interactive voice response, and it's gotten better and better as the years have gone on. Essentially, it's where most everybody starts with a call into a support center or into a call center, or a customer service desk. Being able to, the idea is that IVR has gotten so real and so knowledgeable, and so interactive, that the call will never actually have to leave the IVR, and everything that a caller is looking to get can happen within that within that interaction within the IVR.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's a great example, Matt, because I've seen some of those demos where the IVR can really transform, not just you make the agents productive, they are accurate, they can also actually help with the upselling, cross-selling, the customer experience goes up. I mean, there is no shortcoming in that kind of story. And yet there are there are still a sizable chunk of the corporate world, let's say about 20-25%, depending on the different surveys, who are still in denial. They don't see AI as something that they would like to do. While there are about 5-10% are like pioneer, they are those are the guys who lead the industry, right? And then there are quick followers. They have also taken the lead about 25%, and the rest of the 25% are still at least having some plan, but then still 25% are in total denial. So that's generally a distribution of the corporates across the AI, how they're adopting. My question is that what will be a message to the corporate world in terms of how should they really look at AI? Is it really optional, or is it something too critical for even their survival? Is it inevitable? How would you define from the corporate?
Great question. So let me even take a quick step back, kind of to my initial point. So first, to answer that, I will say that um, the cost of AI as a whole has come down so much. The capabilities have gone up so much that it has opened up the doors for everybody to be able to use it. So I think that's the one, right? I think everybody is able to. There was always this idea early on, go fast, fail fast, get going, and then scale really fast, right? Run real fast. I think being able to do that is even more accessible today because of the cost, right? So there's so much ability when you talk about building your own or building these use cases out. Standing up pilots has really changed. The cost to do it, the skills needed to do it, the workforce needed to do it has really changed, right? It's really opened up the door for everybody to be able to look at this, and you don't need the very, very large budgets to do so. So I think that's one. I think the other big thing is the governance piece is so key, kind of what we were talking about earlier. Really making sure that there is a trust across the enterprise. Again, back to the whole thing around data governance, I bring this up because there was always this idea of the trust factor, right? Making sure the data is trustworthy. I think it's the same idea with AI, right? I think when corporations are looking at really how to scale this, making sure that everything has been trusted, right? There is no bias, there is no ethical issues. And again, allowing that acceleration because a lot of that work has been done and pre-built. Um,
Yeah. I think you actually really covered all those points well in terms of there is the bottom line is there is no excuse and there is no escape. I think that's important because this is inevitable in terms of the AI. It is going to play if a corporate, if a company chooses not to use AI, unfortunately, their competition will. So whoever does will essentially go forward, leap forward. And unfortunately, we see like every 20, 25 years, a wave comes and companies don't, which has happened like with the leaders, like example, Blackberries and Nokia's and so many leaders, like even Xerox. If they don't adapt too quick, they just basically become extinct, unfortunately.
yeah, let me and bring up a great point. Let me add just one more quick thing to that. So we're seeing across the board. We saw this very early on when Gen AI was brought to the market. We're seeing it still. There is so much interest in areas that are new, right? And what I mean by that is well beyond some of the core kind of back office functions, IT, finance, HR, where a lot of these use cases had happened for years. We're seeing the board of directors being very interested in not necessarily just what AI is, but how is it used in their industry? To your point, we have to do something, right? Like, what are some of those keys to be able to do something? Everybody is very interested in what others are doing as well. Who were some of the first movers? What were some of those successes? What drove those successes? And what drove some of the failures, right? I mean, we've seen that too, right? Where some of the projects get started and there's customizations to those projects and changes to those projects where again companies are able to quickly pivot where they may think they're going down the right path, they find out maybe they want to have some sort of change, and that happens, right? We've seen that quite a bit. But to your point, I think every company that I know we're working with, I've talked to, is seeing this as top priority across the board, as not something before it was a nice to have. Now it's an absolute necessity. And again, back to my point on the cost, the security, the responsible AI, all of that plays into the comfort level of being able to know that it's something they have to do to stay up with their competition and be able to know that they can do it in the right way and go fast.
I guess maybe even expanding upon that thought, as companies start to dive in, I think one of the things that I see is they're trying to determine, do I build this from scratch or, do I buy some tool that already has AI incorporated or embedded within? And I think a lot of that really depends on what industry are you in? Are there certain tools that are, prevalent within an industry and what are they doing with AI? But I guess my question back to you, Matt, would be, what are you seeing? Like, is it a build strategy? Is it a buy strategy? Is it somewhere in between? And I kind of think about this just from Microsoft ourselves, where we're building co-pilots like almost for every product, and you see it within our productivity tools. You see it within Azure. I mean, so we're building AI into things. So, how much does that then relate back to a customer on their own strategy? Is it a build? Is it a buy? Is it somewhere in between?
Awesome. Love this question. I think it's interesting because I think back to the start, right? When Gen AI was released, 2+ years ago at this point, and it was a build, right? Because that's what it was, right? The large language models came out. We have the different cognitive services around it. So customers were looking at what are the use cases? Let's build something. Then To your point, Jamie, we release copilots across all of our solutions and continue to release different copilots every day. We just had a number of announcements at Build around some of the things we're releasing around our Fabric solution, with copilots there where they can buy. And a lot of the stuff is already pre-built, 80+% there or more, and be able to use it and just go, right? With a lot of the heavy lifting changed, a lot of the heavy lifting already complete. Now, I will also say that I think it's not a build versus buy, but a build and buy. I think there's going to be this customization ability with all the different things that are in the marketplace, allowing these custom co-pilots, so to speak. So you bring in a co-pilot, a lot of the work is already done, a lot of it's pre-built, and then you can start customizing it. Or if there are use cases, let's go back to those moonshot use cases where there is not a co-pilot. There are so many. We now have these different solutions where the tools are already so integrated and built where they can build these solutions a lot faster. So I look at it as no longer a build versus buy, but I think a build and buy. And I think back to the point on adoption, I think we are seeing when customers get comfortable with one solution, right? It really it spikes the expansion, I would say, or the adoption across other solutions. Okay, we've had success leveraging, this co-pilot. We know we need help in this area, and there's this co-pilot available. How do we leverage this? We've already got the learnings and the skills on how we have the best practices in this particular area. Now it really opens the door to expand across other lines of business, other back office functions, other corporate functions, for companies to start seeing even more ROI, more adoption, and really more competitive advantage as they move forward.
Got it. Thanks, Matt.
That's a great point, Matt. But I think one of the challenges that corporates also see is how do they measure the success of these AI initiatives and the investment that they're doing? What factors should they consider in evaluating the ROI from their investment in AI? Is it too hard to measure, or is it like how should they really go about evaluating that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that we're seeing companies do is think about the ROI they would have for any project, right? AI is no different, right? Think about the ROI for any project that they would really look at on how they're going to add technology to it to improve it, transform it, make that use case better. So I think that's the first thing. I think companies are really looking at so many different parts of the investment when it comes to AI versus some of the typical projects that they may have used. But I think overall being able to really take a step back and understand, what's the return, and then tiering the projects, right? What are some of the use cases that we could start with that potentially we need to do to go fast that we've been trying to do that have failed, that we could leverage AI, leverage Gen AI to be able to accelerate and transform. And then what are some of those larger use cases that may be more costly, more complex, more difficult, but that can wait? So I think back to the COEs, once the COEs are really getting comfortable with triaging these use cases and being able to start tiering which ones make sense to go first. And then I think looking at some of the use cases that once they get into production, really start understanding what the ROI, what the cost was to get there, right? How much. One of the big things we're seeing now with governance as a whole is pricing governance. When you look at the cost of leveraging these models and this different form of now tokens, it's also really changed kind of this idea of the whole, sense of how do you calculate, the return that they're really getting on investment. Some of the stuff that's being embedded, in the co-pilot solution, I think some of that ROI, because of the cost of per user, right? When you think of the two different types of ways that we're really going to market with this per user versus the token based, and when you have the large language models and a number of different ways to run those. So I think the ROI really happens within those COEs that are stood up. And then again, kind of tiering and looking at what use cases make sense to go first, and what use cases would then follow or fast follow after that. Be curious, are you all seeing anything different?
No, they're definitely along the same lines. I think a lot of it is based upon, what's that impact? Are they seeing productivity gains? Can something be reduced in terms of overall time if it's some process? Those are the measures. Ultimately, it comes back to dollars. I mean, we all know that it's, hard dollars, whether or not it's in terms of cost savings or maybe, bringing up new lines of business or things that they couldn't do before. So I think that aligns very well with the things you just mentioned, Matt.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is that I've seen that sometimes it's a trap in terms of trying to always measure the hard dollars directly by reducing the cost. And I would say that the AI goes far beyond that, right? It's also about, improving customer experience is worth a lot. Sometimes the corporate they fall in the trap because they don't measure the customer experience improvement and what does that entail. So they haven't put that formula in place where how much the customer experience improvement is worth it, and that's why they're not able to tie in that ROI to the initiative, and they feel that okay, there is no ROI. But I think that's a trap. What is important is that for them to establish those metrics and make sure that it is measured, so that they don't just try to measure the cost saving but also customer experience improvement, the employee experience improvement. There is so much more that AI can deliver in each and every area of the corporate function.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention something, Shadab. You kind of touched upon customer experience, but just mentioned employee experience as well. I think one thing that gets overlooked sometimes, because everyone does focus on what's the hard dollar cost savings potentially, but it's like, how does AI actually impact your employee? Like, does their satisfaction rate go up because they're using some of these tools, and whether or not it's because they're using the latest and greatest, or maybe just because it makes their job easier. So I think that's a measure of success that should not be overlooked in that regard as well. Since we're talking about employees, maybe another question back to you, Matt, is on, what are you seeing for AI roles in terms of, today's demand? And to me, I could kind of break that up into two different parts. Like, what are you seeing as far as skills and expertise that are needed for the productivity worker as it relates to AI, as well as then what skills and expertise are needed for the technical side? I don't know if you have any, thoughts on, quote unquote, those skills that are needed in today's world, or maybe even in the future world.
So great question. So just real quick, you just before we leave the employee experience, you bring up a great point, Jamie. I just wanted to add this too. I think it was interesting because employee experience was really heating up with everything that happened within COVID, right? So this was pre-Gen AI. There was definitely a demand from the employee to be able to get information faster, be able to get it more seamless, be able to get it more integrated. And to your point, I think there is tremendous ROI around employee experience. I would say the first use case once Gen AI really came out was this whole idea of chat with your data, right? And it was all really focused a lot around the employee and employee experience. And there was a lot of different use cases that we saw, but really being able to tightly integrate all these different back-end systems where you have to go to get information, to be able to then quickly be able to ask a question and then ask another question that is totally unrelated to the first question, all around the employee, right? And the employee getting that information. So I think it's a great point because we're continuing to see big demand around the employee experience. And I think it's a great pivot to the productivity piece. It kind of went from asking questions to then now how do we really tightly align and leverage it, within the day-to-day work. And I think, we're seeing that with Copilot.
So Matt, that was a really good point that we just covered around success and things to think about. The employee experience or satisfaction is certainly one of those things in terms of measures. But I guess maybe another thing that I want to ask you and the experiences that you had is, what are you seeing as far as the employee themselves and the skills that they need in this ever-changing AI world? Like, what should they think about as far as, adopting the way that they work and the skills that they need? Is there anything that resonates with you in terms of the things that you've come across already?
Well, for sure. I think the first thing over the last, and having a ton of different conversations, meetings, discussions with a number of different customers, it's amazing to see the number of fans that are now out there. People are so excited about what this can do, and these are folks that haven't worked in technology or have never done much with AI in the past, and just how much they want to be a fan, and not only just necessarily be a fan, but be a user, be a leader, be a champion around it, has been amazing to see. I'll tell you one quick customer story. I met an individual at a publishing company who's running their AI COE, who had never worked in technology before. Actually, this individual was a journalist, and had such a passion for everything that happened, had transitioned her career to now leading AAI COE, which I thought was fascinating. So we're seeing that the excitement is one thing, but also the criticality of having to be an adopter, having to be a fan has to be there, right? So it's no longer a nice to have; it's really a must have. And I think you're seeing everybody shifting to being able to a couple things. One, understand the power of AI, right? AI is a big term now, right? It means a lot of different things, but really understanding the power of the technology and how not only it can help them, their teams, but also their corporation, their enterprise. I think that's one. I think the second is we're seeing a big shift of, um, you know, users that are then kind of back to my point of being a fan, sharing, right? I think that this whole idea of sharing successes, sharing stories, sharing ways on how different individuals have been able to use it has created a wave of others being able to learn and quickly understand what are some of those best practices that they can use across the bill. We're also seeing a big uptick in skilling, right? And skilling again is a broad term, but when we talk about skilling, skilling of how do I leverage it for myself? What is the power of AI across, not only productivity use cases, but use cases for my group, my team, that could be able to leverage my line of business. So again, I think it's becoming an absolute must-have. I think folks know to be able to keep up, to be able to really stay up, that they have to be able to understand the power of AI, have to understand how to leverage AI, have to understand how to learn and use AI in their own day-to-day lives, plus helping their teams really be able to use it. And again, it's really fascinating to see that this is not just a technology play. These are not just technologists. These are not folks of something that have to be data scientists or developers. This is day-to-day folks that are trying to figure out how to integrate this into their professional lives and personal lives, for acceleration and things that they're doing to be able to free up time to be able to get to things that they never, ever thought that they could do, because there just wasn't enough hours in the day. And I know,
Yeah.
Jamie, you and I have talked in the past about some of the things you're seeing, around the demand and why they have to use it. Be curious to get your thoughts too.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly, the demand is there. And I think an interesting perspective on what you just said is this whole, like, I'll call it an upheaval, if you will, but the whole use of generative AI, it's not just for like those data sciences that you mentioned. What I've been seeing is it's anybody and everybody within a company, from an admin to a CEO, and literally everybody in between. It's how can AI play a role in the things that you're doing today, and we go back to the skilling. It's how do you get those skills that you need to be able to use that? So
Yeah, I think so. Matt and Jamie, you have put it so eloquently, and I think it's so important. I talk to so many people, and there is a kind of like they call it AI anxiety, right? There's an anxiety about the AI itself, right? A lot of people who feel that okay, they don't know how to code, they don't know how to use technically, they don't know anything to do with AI. They feel that they have nothing, no role to play, and I think it couldn't be further from the truth. AI meet you wherever you are. whether you are an end user, an analyst, or admin, or a developer, or executive, wherever you are, AI meets you there. That's the power of the AI. I think it is summed very well by the Professor Karim Lakhani of Harvard Business School. It's a famous quote that AI won't replace humans. It's the humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And I think it's important for people to understand there is so much potential, and there is also a danger of being left behind if you don't, because you don't need to change yourself fundamentally. You just need to know how AI in your own role, in your own daily life, will play a role and just adapt to it, essentially. Right. Um, the only thing is, Matt, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, but I think it is not complete without mention of the responsibility part of it, right? So from the ethics and the governance and the responsibility part of it, what is your message, or what do you see in terms of your perspective? What ethical considerations are there for the corporates to adopt? How do companies ensure that the AI does not increase the divide, that digital divide between the employee, the digital divide, in the society? How should it be taken more with the ethically and responsible way?
So it's a great question, and I think just let me start by saying without responsible AI, and we've talked a lot about adoption. Without responsible AI, without ethical AI, we won't have AI use cases. We won't have AI. Period. I mean, it's all got to be done the right way. There's got to be trust. It's got to be done responsibly. I think everybody has to take part of that, right? And I think we're seeing it. I mean, we see it within our own ecosystem within Microsoft, right? Having a whole office dedicated to responsible AI, right? Having at the forefront. When we first started Gen AI, there was a lag in releasing models, releasing use cases, because we were looking at making sure what was going to go in, what was coming out of these different models, making sure the use cases were being done for the right way. So I think from a bias, from an ethics, it's critical, because if it's not done the right way, that not only does the adoption and the acceleration stop, it can be completely negative. And we've seen that in years past where companies have had issues with that, and it ends up really being a negative situation. So to me, it's everything. It's at the core of everything that we've talked about. There's so much goodness around AI, and it's amazing. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but it's really, truly amazing to be part of this journey, be part of this group, being part of everything with AI. It's just so exciting. But again, like, there is a reality that there are bad actors out there. There are folks that don't want to use AI the right way, and I think it can have a negative impact for everybody. So I think AI for good, responsible AI, ethical AI, seeing companies setting up these offices within these COEs to really look at this. It's that human in the loop to ensure that everything that's going in the model and coming out of the model is really for the right way, in the right spirit. And I think when we're seeing that happen, and that care is really taken, and people are really leaning in to make sure that happens. There's stuff that's pre-built in these models and will continue to be that way. But I also think, kind of back to our point on data governance, it's not just the tools, it's the process, it's the people, and everybody's responsible to make sure that this is done for good and in an ethical way.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Matt, and you touched upon this, that I think Microsoft is doing its part by providing a lot of tools, content safety, or content, I think, provenance, and all those things. I think it's so important to make sure that the abuse, the self harm, hate, and all those kind of metrics are, I think, well protected, as well as the AI, if it is used in decision making, it's fair, it's transparent, it's explainable. There's so many different aspects, and I think each of them are so important. No, I just wanted to check. Anything else, Matt? Would you like to add?
No, just a huge thank you for having me, and really appreciate sharing the insights. And again, it's such an exciting time, exciting space, and so much great things ahead. And I think it's now is the time, right, for companies to really have a very hard look at where they can best use AI and be able to really run fast and adopt. But awesome being with both of you. I know I learned a lot talking to both of you, and really appreciate you having me.
It was such
Thank
an
you, Matt.
honor, man.
Yep, definitely. Thanks again for joining our podcasts or video casts and being here to share your thoughts and ideas. So thanks again.
MMA next time, Jamie. UFC.
Definitely.
Thank
Thanks
you,
all.
man. Bye-bye.